Welcome to the Carrier Update presented by AT&T Business. So we have Dean Croak here, and he's going to give us an update on some of these new proposals for hours of service. Dean, what do we got?
Yeah, Zach, there's some interesting things going on. There's a 15-day comment period that we've got to run until the 28th of September. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what carriers should be doing between now and then. And what I'd like to start out with is a chart behind us, which just shows you the disparity between the number of hours that drivers drive each day. So the lighter colours here are the number of hours that drivers drive on line 3 of their ELD device, which is the on-duty driving piece. And you can see some of the lighter ones here are down in the 5.5 to 6 range. That's not a huge number when you've got 11 hours to run. The darker blues are up in the mid-7s.
Wow.
So they're getting much higher utilisation. But essentially now the average for most drivers is around 7 hours a day, which means they're only using about 63% of their available driving hours each day.
A lot of wasted time.
Yeah. If we have a look at the next chart, you'll see that the average for different lengths of haul varies. You can see that there's about 7.54 hours for the green line, which is the over-the-road longer haul driver, because they've got longer hauls, less population, less traffic, higher average road speed. We're down around 7 hours here on the orange, which is the more regional carrier. Mostly sleeper cabs. You get some day cab operators doing multi-stops for dedicated runs. Down here you've got a much lower number, down in the 5 range. So they're the short haul guys working in the 100 air mile radius, bumping docks all day, probably on hourly pay.
Right.
You're going to see a lot of drivers up here on mileage-based pay.
These are the over-road drivers. These are going to be your P&D drayage type operators.
And the basic message is these guys here, guys and girls, are only getting about 63% of their total available capacity each day to drive. Now the reality is you will never get 11 hours because you always have traffic and weather and delays. But theoretically you should be able to get more than the average of 7 hours. And one of the things that the FMCSA and Administrator Martinez has asked for is public comment on ways to make the hours of service regulation more flexible. So he's announced a range of things, which is a 45-day comment period that started in August. It'll run through to September 28, and it includes changes to things like the 30-minute rest break, and in particular the one I want to focus a bit on today is the split sleeper berth rule. And so every day a driver has to have 10 hours off before starting a new driving shift. And with the particular change they're proposing is allowing drivers to split that 10-hour break into a block of 7 and a block of 2. So a 7 and 2 split instead of 8 and 2. So allowing drivers to have a little bit more flexibility each day. The reality is that a lot of drivers are saying through the comments that they're putting into the government already, we would prefer 5 and 5.
Wow, that's a big difference. Why is so much of a difference?
But it's what it used to be with paper logs. If you study fleets that ran paper logs and ran safely, the sleeper teams would always split 5 and 5. 5 on, 5 off, 5 on, 5 off. And they'd swap drivers out and they were really safe. The reality is that most people that sleep in the day, when they drive through sunrise, the sunlight wakes the brain up, right? And if you're having a 10-hour break in the day, what'll happen is you'll go to bed and you'll sleep for about 4.5 hours in a bouncing sleeper cab, right? And then you get up, right, and you get this big dose of sunlight because you open the curtains and you have a chat, and that sunlight wakes you up. So when you go back to get into bed, you actually can't fall back asleep because the sunlight is trying to wake the brain up. This is the same for shift workers. Most shift workers that work night shift go home, drive home, get a big dose of sunlight, and then go to bed for about 4.5 hours, which is 3 sleep cycles. And then they'll do things outside, get more sunlight, and then not go back to sleep until the 12-hour shift starts about 6 or 7 o'clock at night.
And how many sleep cycles is optimal, Dean?
Well, you need about, generally about 6 sleep cycles a day is probably, pretty good. It's cumulative, so you don't have to get 7.5 hours or 5 sleep cycles solid. 6 is good for the average person. But if you can get 3 sleep cycles, which is 4.5 hours, and then maybe get another 2 sleep cycles or 3 hours later in the day. But the key is not allowing sunlight to hit the optic nerve. So 7 and 2 won't work really because most drivers are only sleeping 4.5, which means 5 on, 5 off actually works best because if you're getting 4.5 every 5-hour break, you're actually getting 9 hours sleep every 24 as opposed to 4.5 every 24.
Right, so that's a lot safer.
It's much safer,
Right.
right? And this is what drivers are saying in the public comment period right now is they want more flexibility to drive when they're awake and sleep when they're tired. Right, so the message for carriers today on the update is make sure you get your comments in the next 15 days. By 9/28, that's the end of the 45-day period. You really need to get those comments in to get some flexibility, certainly to drive safety outcomes, but improve miles per tractor week, because that's the big change, is you'll actually be able to run more hours with more flexibility.
Right, for sure. Flexibility is a big deal.